most important graphic novels that's ever been written is, as many would agree, Watchmen by Alan Moore. Time magazine, in a review of Watchmen, said the publication of Watchmen was the day that comics grew up, the day that comics became adult. Watchmen is not easy reading. It is stuffed full of philosophy, and it is one of the most creative works in this genre that I think that we have ever seen. Initially, Moore wanted to build upon already existing characters in the comics universe, but the publisher was reluctant because they wanted to be able to use those characters for some time, and they thought that if they were used in this novel, that that would be the extent of their lifetime. So most of the characters in Watchmen are created by Moore, and it of course was made into a very successful motion picture. So I'd like to ask the question then about Watchmen. We could say a lot more about it. Perhaps we should say one more thing about it. There are a couple of plots that run through Watchmen, but the one that I wanted to focus on is that this little cadre of superheroes, one solution that is being pursued is one in which they and the governmental powers impose a kind of a lie, impose a myth on the people at large, because the people at large can't handle the full extent of the reality in which they find themselves. The impending apocalyptic threats to their civilization. So the people at large can't be trusted to support the right solution to their situation. So what you have here, among other themes, is a mistrust of democratic processes. Now, in political philosophy, this has been explored in a number of different ways. At the founding of the American Republic, it's quite evident and quite explicit, and being explained in one way or another, that the American founders were willing to allow the people to have only so much say in their government. So there are a lot of screens, a lot of impediments in the American political system that are constructed to provide a kind of a buffer between the government and the people. So this is explored in Watchmen in a very intelligent way, and this particular theme, once again, especially unfolds toward the end of the novel. So if we wanted to look for more places in political philosophy, that is going beyond the writings of the American founders, there are two places I could suggest we could go. One would be to Book 3 of Plato's Republic. There's a very famous discussion in that part of the Republic in which Plato argues that at times the guardians of the Republic may need to impose what he calls a noble lie on the population. That is some sort of myth that will induce the population at large to follow the leadership of the guardians. In this particular noble lie, it has to do with a kind of a social stratification based on, in a mythological sense, the composition of people in each of those classes in a distant past. Now, if I can just digress for a moment, this is also explored, demonstrated, and I think one of the most effective ways, actually in a movie. The movie was directed by M. Night Shyamalan. It stars Adrian Brody. It stars director Ron Howard's daughter, Bryce Howard, and it's an all-star cast. And it's just a fascinating way to try to understand this concept of the noble lie. Joaquin Phoenix also stars in the movie. Let me offer one other perspective on Watchmen, once again from the point of view of political philosophy. And this time I'd like to read a passage from one of the most striking critiques of democracy, one of the strongest criticisms against the ability of people to govern themselves than I think has ever been written in the history of political philosophy. And that's in the book by Ortega y Gasset, entitled The Revolt of the Masses. This is from the opening chapter of the book, and it is entitled The Coming of the Masses. There is one fact which, whether for good or ill, is of utmost importance in the public life of Europe at the present moment. This fact is the accession of the masses to complete social power. As the masses, by definition, neither should nor can direct their own personal existence, and still less rule society in general. This fact means that actually Europe is suffering from the greatest crisis that can afflict peoples, nations, and civilization. Such a crisis has occurred more than once in history. Its characteristics and its consequences are well known. So also its name. It is called the Rebellion of the Masses. So in the book, Jose Ortega y Gasset develops this theme. And the reason he calls the book The Rebellion of the Masses, The Revolt of the Masses, is because he's talking about a point in time in history in which the people refuse to recognize those who should be their leaders. They begin to presume that they really can engage in this business of self-government, at least in some sort of thorough fashion. Ortega y Gasset is pessimistic about people to engage in that degree of self-government. So he uses a striking phrase, the rebellion of the masses. It's fairly gratuitous. It's pretty paternalistic. Some might call it authoritarian. The revolt of the masses means that the population at large rebels against the political order and the political processes which are best for them. So, Watchmen by Alan Moore lends itself to a number of different philosophical explorations. But one of the most important concerns in the history of political philosophy, certainly in democratic theory, is the extent to which people can govern themselves. And so this particularly graphic novel gives us the opportunity to explore that and to learn more about Plato, to learn more about Ortega y Gasset. So it's quite a passage for those who want to learn.